Welcome to the Art of Likability, ranked one of the top podcasts in the world. In this podcast, you'll discover how to leverage likability to build stronger relationships, lead more efficiently, close more sales, and keep customers happy while increasing success in your professional and personal life. Let's jump in with your host, Arel Moody.
What's going on, Likability family? Arel Moody here. Guess what? I'm the host of the Art of Likability podcast. Hello, how are you? Welcome. If this is your first time here, you picked a great episode. If you don't know what we do here, we give you super short, valuable podcast episodes that allows you to increase your likability so you can have better relationships, have the it factor, have charisma, and do it in easy to digest, simple episodes every week. That sounds pretty fantastic to me. You know how fantastic that sounds? It sounds so fantastic. I want to say a bunch of old school references. I'm gonna say a bunch of phrases that you'll only get if you knew slang in the 90s and 2000. I'm gonna say that's dope. I'm gonna say that's fat, P-H-A-T, P-H-A-T. I didn't say that properly. I'm gonna say don't be a herb. I'm going to say check yourself before you wreck yourself. I'm going to say raise the roof. I'm going to say whoop, there it is. I'm going to say can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, bad boy, get that, take that, take that. That's just, I got so excited about this week's episode. I just want to rant with a bunch of old school phrases. If you are younger than 30, you have no idea what I might be talking about. If you're in your early 20s, everything I said means nothing to you. Google it. If you're over 35, you probably know what I'm talking about. Unless you're like 70, then you're probably saying the bee's knees or the cat's whiskers or the cat's meow. But I don't know, whatever old people say. Seasoned veterans, excuse me, not old. Let me respect you. But let me jump into this week's episode so we can make sure you got some great skills. Now, whenever I talk to somebody, I'm actually always curious to learn as much as I can from them. To pull from collective wisdom. And one of the ways to do that is through a really great question that I like to ask people in certain circumstances. And it helps me just pull some very useful information from them. Here's how it typically works. One, this isn't the question, but I like to always ask people, like, what's a book that they really like? Now, typically a lot of the people that I talk to read a lot of nonfiction or self-help or professional development type of books. So people will say a lot of different books and they'll say, I like this book, that book, or whatever. Or they'll say, oh, I just had a great meeting with a mentor of mine. I took a lot from the mentor. A lot of times people say, oh, that's great or fantastic or that's wonderful. I typically like to say something. Now, this is the question that I like to ask, and I want you to start using it. What's one takeaway you got from it? Right? What's one takeaway? Not what's the biggest takeaway, not what's the most important, just what's one takeaway. Sometimes I like to follow up to say something like, hey, what's one takeaway that you got from that book? It could be anything, just the first thing that jumps to your mind, no matter how big or small. Because many times it causes someone to actually reflect on what just happened. Oh, I read this. Let me actually make sure I consume the data. And for whatever reason, there's going to be something that jumps out at them. So if someone says, oh, I just went on like I had a friend who actually went on a 4-day, actually no, it was like a week. It was pretty impressive. No electronic media. So no TV, no phone, no internet, no computer, just, unplugged for a week. And I was like, I asked, how was it, of course, and they went through it. And I was like, what was one takeaway from it? And then they shared their particular takeaway. And then I was like, okay, cool. And it was just something I could get. Now, obviously, me going through a week of not using social media and my phone and a screen is the only way to truly discover and find out for myself. But I could at least absorb, a little bit. And that person basically said that we're way more distracted than we realize. He said, I was way more distracted than I realized. And I was like, oh, that's, I get that. So then I started just thinking about and pondering on that part. Okay, so he took a whole week. He didn't do it. I don't know if I'm going to do that anytime soon. I usually do 1 day a week, by the way, every Friday night to Saturday night in observance of the Sabbath, the Shabbat in Judaism, I don't use a screen. I don't use the internet. I don't go on my phone or anything like that. So I do it once a week, but I've never done it for 7 days in a row. So if what his biggest takeaway was we're very distracted, I can now just reflect for a little bit of how distracted am I? How much do beeps and buzz and dings and vibrations, take my attention? And then I just pondered on it. So it's kind of like I got a little bit of a taste of what that experience was. And I'd like to do that as much as possible because I feel like the more I can learn from others, the more I can ask questions and gain from other people's experience while still gaining from my own, helps me become a better person. So I'd like for you to have that conversation, like, a really great conversation starter or something to ask people when you're hanging out is something to the effect of, what's a book that you recently read that positively impacted your life? Right? Just see what they say. They say a book and then you say the question, what was one takeaway you got from it? Big, small, just anything that pops to your mind. Or what was the last conversation you had that stands out to you that positively impacted you? Right? These are great questions to ask. And then people can say, oh, it's a good question. You spoke with your boss. Great. What's one of the takeaways from that conversation? And then they'll share whatever it is. So it's a really great way, 1, to get people to think, 2, to connect with people, 3, to learn about them, which is super important. And then also 4, to learn from them, which I think this world is just filled with so much amazing knowledge and so many people working on so many things. I recently spoke with someone who was working on their PhD. And I was like, what's one takeaway you've got from your research so far? Just a very simple question, but you can learn a lot. It's actually interesting. I was speaking to one person who was doing their PhD research. And I was like, what's one interesting takeaway? And she said she's actually doing research and found that people who work in jobs where they inhale particulates. So imagine like if you take flour and you throw flour in the air and then you inhale it, there's particles in the air, particulates. You inhale it, sawdust. So like flour might be from a bakery or sawdust from a sawmill. They said that if you inhale that over time, you will get arthritis. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, it's just like I have like people who worked, I forgot what the number of years was, but if you work X amount of years inhaling particulates, you will get arthritis. There's a 100% correlation. I was like, that is incredible. So now if I ever see stuff floating in the air, I shut my mouth and nose and I try to get through it because I am, God willingly, going to do everything I can to not get arthritis by inhaling particulates in particular. So anyway, so stuff like that. So I never knew that. I never heard of that before. You may never have heard of that before. So now you're going to make sure you don't inhale particulates. So it was just something that I was able to gain, from having a quick conversation with someone who had spent years doing all this sorts of research and they came out with this really cool thing. So I kind of like to just grab, and the reason why I don't say what's your biggest takeaway is because for many people, there are so many different takeaways they get. I usually like to, for some reason, I like the one that jumps out at them, like that very first thing. What's, one takeaway that you got from it? Whether it was a conversation, whether it was a book, whether it was something they've done. Like if somebody is like really good with archery, for example, and they do archery, and I go, you've been studying archery. What's one takeaway that you would give to someone to improve on their archery? What's a common mistake, that people wouldn't? Something like that to get a very simple little improvement. Now, you may get, information about things you'll never really need, but you just know, and it might just make life a little more interesting. Or you might get some information that pretty game-changing for the work that you're doing. So it all depends on, how interested you are in people. And I genuinely believe one of the keys of likability is if you want to become interesting to people, you become interested in them. And this is a great way that you can simply become interested in people. And it's a really powerful question for you to learn, which I think is a win-win. So apply this. Let me know. And hey, I'd love to know, do me a favor. If you could shoot me a tweet at Arel Moody, AREL MOODIE. That's AREL MOODIE, or send me a LinkedIn message or a Facebook message of what's a book that you've recently read that's impacted you, and what was one takeaway you got from the book. I'd love to do that. Recently a friend of mine told me about a book I've never read called The Celestine Prophecy. So I'm currently reading that, and I'm like, wow, this is a really great, interesting read. So I would have never known if I didn't ask. So I'm asking you, what's a book you're reading, and what's one takeaway that you got from it? I'd love to hear from you, okay? So use this question. Make sure to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button if you've not done so yet. And please leave a 5-star review. It makes my day. I check it every other day or so, and I love seeing a new review and what someone has to say about it. So just don't give the 5-star review and then bounce, bounce. That's another old school phrase right there. Roll out, dip on a brother. You know what I'm saying? Pimp a ride, #exhibit, #MTV. But let me know your thoughts. The more in depth and the more you write, the better. So go ahead and do so. Check us out on artoflikability.com. If you have a job interview coming up, we've got our incredible interview manual that has a super huge, amazing success rate in getting people jobs. So don't leave it to chance. Give it as a gift to someone who maybe is trying to graduate from college or doing a job search. It'd be a great gift to give them. We have the online course as well. And of course, our online course on how to start and keep a conversation going with anyone. So you can be the most incredible conversationalist at the next event you go to, business or personal. So I hope you don't just listen, because this information means nothing. The application and implementation of this information will absolutely change your life. Thanks so much for joining me this week. Can't wait to see you next week. Thanks for being a part of the family here at the Art of Likability podcast. You are awesome.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast, The Art of Likability, and reach out with any questions you have. Until next time, remember, my friend, you are awesome.